One of the first mistakes we make in reading the Exodus narrative is to assume that God's saving of his people is contingent upon their keeping the law. In our minds, the law precedes the saving. However, in the narrative of Exodus, it is the reverse. See, God graciously saves his people in chapters 3 through 14, and then the law is given in chapter 19. If not law-keeping, what is God's reason for saving the Israelites from captivity? We find that answer in Exodus 3:16 through 17. It reads, "The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey." This passage shows us that God's reason for bringing Israel out of slavery is not law-keeping, but his promises to Abraham. Yahweh keeps his word and is seeing that word through by bringing the descendants of Abraham out of Egypt to the promised land. This time of slavery was forespoken of in Genesis 15:13 through 14, but would only be temporary. So if Sinai is not primarily about codifying the laws that would cause the Israelites to be saved, what is its purpose? The author dives into this question by explaining how Sinai is framed within the larger story of the Exodus. There exist wilderness accounts before and after Sinai, placing the Sinai account as the climax of the narrative. We are told about the desert 7 times before Sinai and 7 times after. We were given details about manna and quail, as well as 2 requests for water prior to Sinai, and then are presented with the same mirrored stories after. This is a literary device known as Chiasm, which presents the details of the historical events in a way that highlights the middle, essentially saying to the reader, look, this is important. This is where we find the importance of the wilderness wandering, which is climaxed in the Sinai event. It becomes the place where the people of Israel move from a mixed multitude to the community of Yahweh. Imes, the author, calls the wilderness jersey the liminal place, where the transition occurs. She uses the analogy of a wedding. Prior to the wedding, the bride and the groom are unmarried. During the wedding, they are neither unmarried or married, and after, they're married. In the wilderness, Israel was becoming something that they were not prior. Yahweh uses this time to craft and mold them into his people for a purpose. This time of becoming the chosen people of God is long, arduous, and complicated. But God's plan is good, and he uses this time to teach, to love, to rebuke, and to lead his people. Consider this quote from Imes. God is not in a hurry to lead them out of liminal space and into the land he promised to give them. They're not ready yet. Into this vacuum, Yahweh speaks. He answers the basic questions of human existence in surprising new ways, offering himself as the solution to their needs for leadership, guidance, protection, and provision, and revealing his name as the key to their identity and vocation as his people. Consider next how the Israelites respond to this liminal space. They cry out to God in Exodus 14:11 through 12. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? The Israelites in the wilderness quickly turn on God. Driven by their hunger, thirst, and fear, God has brought them to this place for a reason and has proven himself trustworthy, yet they struggle to remember and instead resort to being driven by their doubts and their trepidations. How does God respond? He provides for them, and he keeps being gracious to them. He leads them not on the shortest route, but on the route that keeps them from war and discouragement, Exodus 13:17 through 18. He ensures their safety in travel, Exodus 13:21, and he provides them with ways of escape that are gracious, Exodus 14:16 through 20. God uses this time and the hardship that comes with it to prove himself to the people over and over again. It doesn't take long for the Israelites to begin to grumble about water. Instead of asking the God who had provided so much already, they complain about Moses and his leadership. Never mind that Yahweh had made it clear that Moses was to be the appointed leader. He had not provided for them in the way that they wanted, and in the timing that they had in mind. One thing the Israelites would need to learn in the wilderness was that trust in God meant trusting His timing, His plan, even when it doesn't line up with what they think is best. But God still provides. In a flip on the events of the plagues, God provides water to drink and bread and meat to eat. He provides enough for them, but not more than enough. He's teaching them to trust Him for what they need. And every time the Israelites strike back against Moses' leadership, God gives him an opportunity to prove Himself and show that He is who God has appointed. The Israelites must learn to trust those whom God has given leadership, because ultimately that appointment is for their good. The wilderness is the place that Yahweh chooses to teach these lessons. And this is something that He does to this day with His people, with you and with me. It is often the wilderness in our lives that we learn and grow the most to look like Christ.